You've heard the word organic, you've heard the word conventional farming maybe. Lately, you're hearing a lot about regenerative farming. And a lot of you don't really know what that means. So I'm going to try to cap this up for you a little bit. What does regenerative farming mean? So what does regenerative agriculture mean? Well, what it means to me is coming in and taking a place like this site that we're on here, and without continuing the same bad practices of the folks before you, deep tilling, pesticides, commercial fertilizers, giant monocropping, displacement of the native creatures and peoples. That's not a very good example of what agriculture should look like. So what does regenerative agriculture means? It means we need to take what we've learned and we need to regenerate it. We need to regenerate the soil. We need to regenerate the people, because we're serving, this is about people, it's about the land. Regeneration means that families can live close to the land and eat from it and give to it and take from it. And there's a prosperity that comes out of this. So regenerative farming I'm going to cap through, rather than straight rows off a contour, plastic on the ground, chemical fertilization, all one crop. Again, the displacement of the animals and the peoples, so one entity can make tons of money off of it and not care what they give back to the land. That's the opposite of regenerative farming. Regenerative farming is looking at the land and saying, how can I serve it? How can I serve this land, bring it prosperity, and also have prosperity for me and my family? So when I think of regenerative farming, I really think of the small family farm. And that could even be as big as 20 acres when we talk about the small family farm. Not 1,000 hectares of corn or soybean or limes. Ridiculous. What we're talking about is enough that you can handle. You can handle with a co-op of people, or maybe just your family, the small family farm. But you can make every decision that you make on that land that you give to it. You give to it and it will give back to you. You try to fix the problems with erosion. You try to put the nutrients back into it through looking at how nature does it. You try to learn what we've learned from nature and even speed it up. We can chip trees into chips in an hour, which would have taken a century, and we can put it on the ground. We can reintroduce the beneficial creatures. We can reintroduce trees that put shade and form canopy. We can stop doing lines off of contour that allow the dirt to slide right down the mountain into the ocean. We can think about bordering it with plants that allow the pollinators to live in our area. And we can also think about strategically planting things that build the soil so that we're not growing a crop and stripping it and having to use chemicals and turning it into inert material. We want life in the soil. We want to build a web underneath the ground. And this is the way we want to farm with regenerative farming. We want to regenerate. So how do we do that at home? We can do that at home, right in our home garden. So a lot of people's houses are completely covered with non-food plants, with plants that aren't from that area, plants that host a series of pests and do all kinds of gnarly stuff. Amongst them, there are also some really good plants. So I think observing and educating yourself is the very first step. What's good for the land in my area? What's bad for the land in my area? What are the problems? How can I help correct that? So what do I want to regenerate within my own yard? That can start with most people, a lot of people, the yard waste. When they mow their yard, all that grass is leaving the property and going to the dump or going into a garbage can. The leaves that fall off the tree are going into bags and they're leaving the property. Now imagine if you took all that material and you put it in a consolidated worm bin behind the house and you fed it to earthworms, and they turned it all into super nutrient dense soil that you can spread around the yard again. How could you go wrong with that? That's a great first step right there. Stop wasting your green waste and turn it into yard gold. That's what we're calling it. Because now it's gonna increase the fertility of your land. It's gonna allow nutrients, greener trees. They're feeding the material that they would normally feed themselves and would be taken away from them, and we're giving it back to them. So that's a good step first, right off the bat. Stop terming green waste and yard waste, and let's call it yard gold. And we're gonna be able to use that to help increase the fertility on our land. So let's also take it a step further and go, okay, am I using Roundup to get rid of the weeds? Am I using pesticide? We'll cut those both right out of the picture. because they're not serving you. The Roundup is doing something you could easily do by managing it and putting wood chips over it and then pulling it like butter and feeding it to the land, or cutting it with a weed eater. There's several ways to deal with it that you don't need herbicide. And you don't need chemical fertilizers, some of the stuff that's being used out there. So it's about, first is observation, looking what's going wrong with it, what can you regenerate in your yard, what can you do to help it, where are the problems at, what do you want to get out of it, do you want to eat out of it, do you also want to allow it to help with the native species around you? We've done some areas where we've taken people's swimming pools and we've gotten the chlorine out of them and we've turned them into aquaponic systems that actually feed the entire yard. They feed the bees and the native creatures, and there's fish swimming around in them. So there's something to be said about, there's many different aspects we can take on of doing regenerative farming right at home. We can be the guy with the aquaponic system, we can be the guy with the raised beds, or we can really just be the person that does the very least and just at least keeps their green waste and turns it into yard gold and gives it back to their plants later. That's a great first step. But we're going to teach you. We're going to pull you along on this journey with us through our channel here and through the different things that we're doing with filming. We want to actually let people understand that everybody can take on this aspect of regenerative farming. At home, in a larger scale, even in an apartment building, there's things that you can do to at least keep green waste out of the dump, keep methane out of the air, and make sure that anything you're consuming, even if you don't have a farm, perhaps it can go to someone else's farm and it can take a part in regenerating the land rather than being part of the problem, sitting in a dump, turning into methane, going back into greenhouse emissions. So there's several ways we can approach taking on regenerative farming at home, and this is just a little idea. We'll try to keep you posted. Perhaps we'll do a whole series on the home regenerative gardener. I think that would be really useful. And this is going to cover like how to identify what is a pest, what is a friend. Sometimes we're killing something in the garden that's actually a total friend and we don't realize it. Sometimes we're nurturing something that's a pest and it's destroying things around us, and then we're spraying pesticide because we think it's something else. So observation, education, patience, consistency. That's what we want to have here. It's easy to get caught in the doom and the gloom. There's a lot of nasty stuff happening around us. And you might think the little difference, the things I do won't make a difference in the larger picture. But, you know, really take solace in the fact, I say, that when you do it and your neighbor sees it, they'll start doing it. When people understand that it's doable and you actually start, at the very least, you're eating fresh zucchini and carrots and picking fruits that you know don't have pesticide on them. That is going to shine off of you onto others, and before you know it, your neighbors start asking you and their neighbors start asking them. So even if you can't change the world by doing it, you can change yourself, and you can change the way that you interact with the nature around you. Your yard is your oasis. It's your little place to malama. It's your stewardship. You may not be able to do it somewhere else where they're messing it up, but if you do it at home, it will reflect on you, it will reflect on your family. Your children will take that with them when they go into the world. Your neighbors will take it on. And you will be able to do what I'm so inspired by the small family farm, the household. Grandma had an apple tree that she could give apple pie to the neighbors, and it was her own. We need to take that back. We need to take agriculture back from the big industry with regenerative agriculture, but we also need to make our homes prosperous for us and for the land. And that's what really prosperous community means by taking on with stewardship and regenerative agriculture. So check it out, subscribe to our YouTube channel, check out what we're doing on Instagram, and yeah, global warming.